The sun was already high over the suburban streets of coastal Southern California, casting a glaring light over freshly trimmed lawns and pastel-colored homes. The scent of barbecue smoke mixed with the faint salt air from the nearby coast, an odd comfort that belied the tension simmering in my chest. Every year, this annual family barbecue stretched into a sprawling event, 40, maybe 50 people, mostly my parents' friends, milling around like bees around a hive. And every year, without fail, I was the one expected to run the show. It wasn't offered. It was assumed. At 43, I should have known better, but here I was, flipping shrimp skewers and pouring Merlot while my siblings lounged inside, laughing at jokes I wasn't part of. When did I agree to be the family's unpaid help? That question haunted me as sweat traced down my spine, mixing with the faint scent of rosemary from the grilling station. Inside, my mother hovered, micromanaging each move. "Heather, don't forget the Merlot, oh, and make sure the shrimp isn't burnt this time," she called out, her voice sharp yet casual, as if I were invisible but somehow responsible for every detail. My brother's wife leaned back on the patio chair, smirking when a droplet of red wine trickled down the side of a glass I had just filled. No one lifted a finger to help. I remembered being 17, told I had to learn the art of hosting because I was the baby of the family. That line had followed me into adulthood, a quiet chain I wore willingly until now. In this moment, it felt like a shackle. Even as a successful architect with projects that demanded attention and creativity, today I was reduced to serving strangers my parents claimed as friends. If I left right now, would anyone notice, or would the first complaint be about underdone steaks? A guest's voice broke through my thoughts, sharp and teasing. "Are you the caterer or just playing one today?" Laughter erupted around me. I forced a smile, but inside, a knot of resentment tightened. My father waved the comment off with a casual, "It's just jokes, honey. Don't be sensitive." I bit back a sigh, remembering my niece's voice, too young to understand the weight of words. "I hope I don't end up like Aunt Heather," she said, her comment met with more laughter. I carried the tray of ice inside, yet instead of returning to the chaos, I slipped into the quiet of the garage, letting the door close softly behind me. In that small sanctuary, I questioned why this had been my role for decades. Then I overheard my sister's voice, unmistakable. "Heather should be grateful we still include her." My chest tightened. That was the first crack in the polished facade I'd maintained for years. Back at the backyard, the boiling point approached without fanfare. My father's orders came, loud and pointed, for all to hear. "Heather, more wine. And don't burn the shrimp again." Heads turned, eyes flicking between me and the platter in my hands. I smiled politely, but the smile was a mask. Inside, a storm was brewing. My mind replayed every birthday I had cleaned, every meal I had prepared while standing last in line to eat, the silent hours of labor unnoticed, unthanked. I spotted a family photo on the table, the one meant to represent our gatherings, and felt a sting. I wasn't in it. Just a background note in everyone else's story. I needed air. Slowly, deliberately, I walked away from the laughter, the chatter, the oblivious family. Down to the dock, where the ocean breeze cut through the heat, I breathed deeply. There it was, the yacht, tied neatly to the pier, gleaming in the afternoon sun. Left by my father's boss who had come for the event, it sat inviting and untouched. The door swung slightly open. Inside, champagne chilled, waiting. No one noticed my absence. A voice in my head whispered, piercing through the suppressed anger and humiliation, "You'll always be invisible here. Or you can make them see you leave." I hesitated only a heartbeat before stepping aboard, leaving behind the smirks, the micromanagement, the unacknowledged effort. Finally, I had a choice in my own story. Stepping onto the yacht, still in my barbecue apron, I felt a tremor in my hands that wasn't entirely from the afternoon heat. The clamor of the backyard, the laughter, the clinking glasses, the casual disregard, was replaced by the gentle lapping of water against the dock. Silence stretched around me, almost unfamiliar, yet liberating. I paused, catching my reflection in the tinted window, a version of myself I barely recognized, a woman on the edge of patience and purpose. Slowly, I opened a bottle of water meant for guests and drank, savoring each sip as if it were a quiet act of rebellion. Memories of my father's voice cut through, "You're too soft to ever leave." I whispered under my breath, "Guess he was wrong," feeling a rush of something I hadn't felt in years, autonomy. The interior of the yacht was immaculate. Crisp white surfaces gleamed, counters polished, champagne chilling in pristine holders. It was elegant, almost impersonal, the kind of luxury I had admired from afar but never allowed to touch. I walked around, noting every subtle detail, the leather-bound guest book, the discreet monograms, the precision of every arrangement. My father's handwriting inside the book caught my eye, praising his hardworking daughter as if she were a display piece rather than a person. Then it hit me, the yacht, this symbol of sophistication and power, had been paid for indirectly by a project I had led years ago at my architecture firm. The irony stung, the life I built for myself had funded the very playground I was excluded from. I sat heavily on the lounge bench, feeling the weight of all the years I had been overlooked. Sinking into the soft cushions, I allowed my mind to wander through the catalog of slights I had endured. My mother's constant comparisons, "Your sister married better. You should have listened," echoed harshly, alongside memories of quietly covering mortgage payments while being mocked for my independence. I reached for my phone and texted my assistant to confirm the ownership details of the yacht, a small but vital act to anchor myself in reality. The evidence confirmed what my gut had known all along. Gratitude, I realized, could not be demanded from those who viewed my efforts as entitlement, not affection. "You can't get gratitude from people who think they own your kindness," I muttered to the empty cabin, letting the words settle. With deliberate care, I removed my apron and folded it neatly beside the champagne, a small ritual marking the shedding of servitude. I photographed the guest log and the invoice with my company logo discreetly stamped inside, securing proof of the irony I now fully recognized. A sudden ping on my phone broke the quiet, a text from my father. "Where are you? Everyone's waiting." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed a response, "You never waited for me," and then deleted it. Instead, I uploaded a photo of the yacht's deck to my private social media, captioning it, "Sometimes, you have to walk off the shore to see the whole storm." The act was subtle, yet it carried a power I hadn't exercised in years, the reclaiming of my narrative, my moment of quiet defiance. The calm, however, was not to last. Footsteps approached the dock, muffled but hurried. I peeked through the cabin curtain to see my father and brother arguing, scanning the pier for me. Panic flitted across my chest before settling into resolve. My father's voice carried over the water, "If she thinks this tantrum will work, she's wrong." I felt my jaw tighten and a steady clarity settle in its place. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to let him see me leave. I stayed on the yacht, hidden from anyone still searching at the barbecue, letting the soft sway of the water dictate the rhythm of my thoughts. The night had grown quiet, almost intimate, with only the subtle lap of waves against the hull accompanying me. I poured myself a glass of wine, not to celebrate, but to remember, to breathe through the years of frustration I had buried beneath polite smiles and dutiful nods. Above, the stars scattered across the sky reminded me of another night, 6 years ago, when pride and humiliation had first intertwined. My fingers hovered over the phone, considering a call to the one person who had seen everything that night, the one who might understand. A quiet thought echoed through me, they weren't absent then, they were watching. The gala had been a glittering affair in San Diego. I was 25, standing in a navy gown that my sister had reluctantly curled my hair for, more obligation than affection. The company was honoring me for completing a major project under budget and ahead of schedule, yet pride dissolved quickly into discomfort. My parents arrived late, underdressed and whispering criticisms about other guests, carrying the unmistakable aroma of casual disregard. My father, in particular, interrupted my acceptance speech with a poorly timed joke that drew laughter at my expense. Later, I discovered he had circulated my business cards, claiming he funded my career as if it were a family gift rather than the fruits of my labor. That same week, he withdrew thousands from my joint account, labeling it a family loan that was never repaid. At the time, I convinced myself it was just his way of showing pride, however clumsy. But now, revisiting it in my mind, clarity cut through the excuses. It was theft, veiled as involvement. I remembered the gaslighting that followed, the familiar line, "Why do you always think the worst of us?" My sister's laughter still rang in my ears when I confronted them. "It's just money. Grow up." The betrayal upon betrayal had accumulated without a breaking point, until this night, as I sat on the yacht, the memory burning with renewed clarity. It wasn't just money, it was mine, I whispered to the darkened cabin, feeling the first stirrings of calculated resolve. Opening my banking app again, I examined the same withdrawals, screenshotting each one, a methodical act of reclaiming control. My old emails resurfaced, one from the gala sponsors highlighting my speech, "Strength is born in silence, but it lives in clarity." Every step I had taken to please them, to prove myself, had been twisted into leverage against me. I began drafting a timeline, the money taken, the events disrupted, the emotional toll meticulously recorded. My fingers hovered over the send button on a draft email to my lawyer, hesitating only to let the gravity settle. If they had taught me anything over the years, it was how to cover tracks. Now, I had learned to track them better. The sudden knock at the yacht cabin door startled me, loud enough to slice through my carefully maintained calm. I froze, expecting my brother, but the tone carried a different cadence, familiar, probing, and insistent. My sister's voice, cutting through the night air, "I know you're in there. You always run when it gets hard." The door remained closed, the tension tangible, coiling around my pulse. I inhaled slowly, centering myself. The difference now? I wasn't the one hiding anymore. I stood at the edge of the yacht's deck, the early night breeze brushing my face, the estate spread out before me like a theater of shadows. Family members moved indoors, their silhouettes blurred by distance and dim lighting, unaware that I was watching, calculating. Rielin's last text replayed in my mind, the subtle warning of schemes hidden behind polite smiles. My thoughts drifted over past gatherings, each memory a reminder of how I had stayed silent to avoid conflict, how my restraint had been mistaken for compliance. I imagined every possible outcome tonight, balancing risk against principle, cataloging allies, potential witnesses, and leverage points. Preparation is power, silence is strategy, I murmured to myself, grounding my resolve in the quiet anticipation of confrontation. Inside the yacht cabin, I searched for documents and photographs tied to the family estate and previous events. Receipts, invitations, and notes littered drawers and shelves, a record of misrepresentation of my contributions. My pulse quickened when I found a notarized letter implicating my father and sister in decisions made without my consent. Every discovery was documented carefully, photographed with my phone, metadata preserved to ensure undeniable proof. Satisfaction mingled with tension, I was armed, yet the confrontation loomed. A silent alarm set on my phone would alert me if anyone approached unannounced, a precaution, not paranoia, a shield for what was to come. The intercom buzzed, and my father's voice called me to the deck for a private conversation. I stepped out, the evening air crisp against my skin, the gentle sway of the yacht underfoot, and the distant clinking of glasses from the estate echoing faintly. Calm and measured, I approached, controlling my breathing, holding my posture with quiet authority. Polite words masked the tension as the conversation began, a dance of subtle assertions and careful probing. I maintained eye contact, watching for every flicker of deceit, every sign of manipulation, planting seeds of doubt without revealing the full extent of my knowledge. My boundaries were clear, my presence unwavering. I placed the notarized letter in sight, a quiet but unmistakable signal that I knew the truth of their deceptions. I spoke with measured confidence, highlighting my contributions without defensiveness, letting each word resonate. I observed my father and sister closely. Unease flickered in their eyes, small flinches betrayed their discomfort, subtle glances exchanged between them. After each statement, I allowed silence to linger, letting the weight of my words settle. Inside, I felt a shift, a movement of power. No longer a passive observer, I was setting the pace, steering the narrative of this confrontation, poised for whatever came next. A shadow moved across the deck. My niece, Rhialyn, stepped forward silently, watching the exchange unfold. She mouthed a hint about communications I hadn't known existed, a subtle thread woven into the tapestry of deceit. I realized in that moment that this confrontation wasn't solely for me anymore, it was for every voice that had been silenced, every injustice left unspoken. The quiet intensity of the night, the strength gathered in measured words and deliberate pauses, formed a new foundation. I felt the weight of history and the spark of defiance intertwine, guiding the next steps with clarity and resolve. I realized this night, I was no longer just standing up for myself, I was speaking for everyone who had been silenced. I slipped into the quiet corner of the yacht, the dim evening light softening the edges of the world around me. The evidence I had gathered felt heavier now, not just in my hands but in the clarity it brought. A manipulated event log caught my attention. My contributions had been reassigned publicly to my sister, disguised under layers of polite conversation and subtle omission. I mapped possible responses in my mind, a confrontation timed to reveal leverage, a silent exposure meant to unsettle without a word. Every detail mattered, the emotional triggers that could be used subtly, the right moment during the family gathering when impact would be greatest. Patience was my weapon, hasty moves would weaken my position. Acting too soon could undo the quiet advantage I had cultivated. I sent a discreet message to a younger family member I trusted, testing whether subtle support existed before the storm. Observing from the yacht deck, I noticed my sister's gestures, the faint stiffening of her shoulders, the tone of my father's voice that carried unspoken defensiveness. Conversations passed near the estate lawn, laughter and the clink of glasses mingling with the cool evening air. A visitor, unexpected, let slip a hint that my planned reveal was no longer entirely secret. I remained calm, my composure intact, revealing nothing of the knowledge I now held. The stakes were higher than I'd anticipated, yet I felt empowered, aware of the subtle dynamics at play, of the insight I had gained into the family's inner workings. I tested minor moves, letting pieces of evidence show without direct confrontation. Each small gesture, placing a receipt subtly on the table, casually referencing a timeline of events, elicited micro-reactions. My sister's eyes flickered, my father's jaw tightened, but I remained serene, watching the shift in energy. I felt a quiet satisfaction, no longer the passive participant, I had begun to influence the narrative, even without words. Supportive nods or lingering looks from allies reassured me that the strategy was taking root, that the psychological landscape was tilting subtly in my favor. I planned the next steps, calculating timing, audience, and the leverage of each move, savoring the first rush of quiet victory. Rising tension required control. I practiced measured reactions, ensuring my posture, gestures, and tone projected authority. I rehearsed potential exchanges, prepared to redirect manipulation with calm and precision. I will not be provoked, every word and action counts, I reminded myself, anchoring in deliberate control. As the night deepened, I monitored my own escalating emotions, pausing to steady my breath, to let the yacht's gentle sway and the distant estate activity fade into the background. Each passing moment reinforced confidence. When the moment to act came, it would be decisive, visible, and under my command. Then the subtle betrayal appeared. A confidential email, clearly not intended for me, landed on my tablet. It revealed further scheming, evidence of alliances and manipulations I had not fully anticipated. My stomach tightened, and I understood that the upcoming confrontation would define not just tonight but the hierarchy of influence I had been denied for years. The tide had turned quietly tonight, but I sensed the real storm was still approaching. The yacht's deck was bathed in the fading gold of sunset, the marina stretching beyond it in calm, reflective waters. I traced back through the subtle victories of the evening, the small reactions my family had offered to my carefully placed evidence. Each flinch, each sidelong glance, told a story I had long ignored, a silent confession of guilt, of complicity. I consolidated notes in my mind, weighing every detail, planning the next moves with strategic patience. Yet, even as I felt the quiet thrill of control, a subtle betrayal emerged. A trusted ally, someone I thought aligned with me, had shared information in whispers elsewhere. The stakes tightened. Every step had to count, miscalculations could undo all the careful orchestration of the night. I breathed in deeply, grounding myself, reminding my mind that calm observation was power. Organizing the evidence felt ritualistic, almost sacred. Emails, videos, documents, everything that traced years of manipulation was sorted and reviewed, ready to be deployed at the right moment. I placed subtle allies in positions to watch, to witness the inevitable exposure without giving away my plan. Anticipating counterarguments from my father and sister, I rehearsed measured expressions, controlled tone, the pauses that carried weight. In reviewing their weaknesses, a new insight struck, an arrogance so palpable in the main antagonist that even the smallest misstep on their part could become leverage. Determination pulsed through me, tempered with composure, as I prepared to act with the precision of someone who had long observed but never struck. I tested the waters carefully, engaging indirectly, planting questions that seemed casual but carried hidden weight. Family members' reactions were telling, attempts to manipulate or deflect were carefully recorded in my mind. Each response was evidence, each small reveal a piece of the puzzle I had been assembling in silence for years. Timing was everything. I balanced the internal urge to act immediately with the strategic advantage of waiting for the optimal moment. Anticipation mounted alongside caution, an internal conflict between the desire to confront now and the necessity to maximize impact. Each breath reminded me that patience, though difficult, could turn advantage to absolute control. Reflection crept in, a quiet but persistent presence. I remembered the years of passivity, of quiet endurance, the way I had allowed family dynamics to dictate my visibility. Now, calculated action replaced hesitation, and the confidence of unseen authority grew with every internal decision. Yet lingering fears and potential regrets whispered, a misstep, an untimely exposure, could unravel everything. I debated internally whether a subtle reveal would suffice or if the complete exposure would best assert control. I felt the balance of anger, caution, and resolve, understanding that the night's unfolding required both strategic mind and steady nerve. Observing the surroundings, the quiet movement of people on the lawn, I ensured nothing would disrupt the careful choreography I had laid. A last-minute revelation altered everything. Information from an overlooked source reshaped timing and approach, forcing recalibration. The calm I had felt on the yacht moments ago shifted, the strategic patience had a limit, and the opportunity to act was narrowing. I knew that inaction now could mean surrendering control of the narrative I had fought to reclaim. Just as the sun dipped behind the marina, casting elongated shadows across the water, I understood with crystalline clarity, tonight's calm was merely the eye of the storm about to break. The marina lights shimmered on the water, throwing fractured reflections across the yacht's polished deck. I took a deep breath, gathering every piece of evidence I had meticulously collected over the past weeks, organizing it in my mind and on my tablet. Allies were discreetly positioned, their eyes alert, ready to witness the revelations. From the corner of the cabin, a previously silent cousin stepped forward, subtly nodding, signaling quiet support. Anxiety and anticipation coiled in my chest, but my expression remained calm, measured. Tonight, everything counted, there was no room for error. I stepped toward the center of the deck, documents in hand, and began exposing the family's manipulations. Photos, emails, and messages were presented with precision, each piece delivered like a carefully aimed arrow. I observed my father and sister closely. The slightest shift in posture, a faltering glance, the tightening of lips, all gave away their unease. The antagonist reacted immediately, trying to spin and undermine my credibility, but I countered with calm, unassailable reasoning, highlighting the misdeeds with clarity. Every word, every pause, carried weight. Tension escalated as verbal sparring revealed the depth of deception. I felt adrenaline surge, tempered by the confidence of having the undeniable proof. The manipulation attempts continued, subtle but palpable, as the antagonist tried to regain dominance. I met each move with quiet authority, deploying evidence strategically to demonstrate patterns of wrongdoing without aggression. Family members' reactions provided further confirmation. My control over the narrative was growing. Then, the final piece emerged, a notarized document confirming a financial betrayal that had been carefully hidden. The shift was immediate and visible. Shock and panic rippled across their faces. The stakes peaked. There was no pause, only continuous momentum. My pulse raced, not from fear but from the thrill of asserting rightful authority over the situation. Victory was tangible as the antagonist faltered, unable to dispute the evidence. Witnesses, previously hesitant, now recognized the depth of the betrayal and the intelligence behind my actions. I spoke with measured strength, reclaiming autonomy and asserting my worth. The tension that had held the night captive dissolved into quiet acknowledgement. Subtle cues from earlier chapters had culminated in this decisive moment. Relief washed over me, tempered with the satisfaction of validation. For the first time, my patience, strategy, and intelligence aligned to produce undeniable clarity. I stood firm, knowing the truth now rested entirely in my hands, unshakable and visible to all. Yet the night's events left threads unresolved. While immediate deception had been exposed, underlying tensions lingered, subtle and persistent. I could feel the residual grudges, the lessons unlearned, the cautious glances that promised lingering consequences. The calm after the confrontation was deceptive, and I sensed that trust, once fractured, would take years to mend, if ever. As I looked out over the marina, the water catching the faint glimmers of light from the deck, I realized that while the immediate battle was won, the war for recognition, respect, and genuine connection within this family had only just begun. The night was far from over. The marina lights shimmered on the water, throwing fractured reflections across the yacht's polished deck. I took a deep breath, gathering every piece of evidence I had meticulously collected over the past weeks, organizing it in my mind and on my tablet. Allies were discreetly positioned, their eyes alert, ready to witness the revelations. From the corner of the cabin, a previously silent cousin stepped forward, subtly nodding, signaling quiet support. Anxiety and anticipation coiled in my chest, but my expression remained calm, measured. Tonight, everything counted, there was no room for error. I stepped toward the center of the deck, documents in hand, and began exposing the family's manipulations. Photos, emails, and messages were presented with precision, each piece delivered like a carefully aimed arrow. I observed my father and sister closely. The slightest shift in posture, a faltering glance, the tightening of lips, all gave away their unease. The antagonist reacted immediately, trying to spin and undermine my credibility, but I countered with calm, unassailable reasoning, highlighting the misdeeds with clarity. Every word, every pause, carried weight. Tension escalated as verbal sparring revealed the depth of deception. I felt adrenaline surge, tempered by the confidence of having the undeniable proof. The manipulation attempts continued, subtle but palpable, as the antagonist tried to regain dominance. I met each move with quiet authority, deploying evidence strategically to demonstrate patterns of wrongdoing without aggression. Family members' reactions provided further confirmation. My control over the narrative was growing. Then, the final piece emerged, a notarized document confirming a financial betrayal that had been carefully hidden. The shift was immediate and visible. Shock and panic rippled across their faces. The stakes peaked. There was no pause, only continuous momentum. My pulse raced, not from fear but from the thrill of asserting rightful authority over the situation. Victory was tangible as the antagonist faltered, unable to dispute the evidence. Witnesses, previously hesitant, now recognized the depth of the betrayal and the intelligence behind my actions. I spoke with measured strength, reclaiming autonomy and asserting my worth. The tension that had held the night captive dissolved into quiet acknowledgement. Subtle cues from earlier chapters had culminated in this decisive moment. Relief washed over me, tempered with the satisfaction of validation. For the first time, my patience, strategy, and intelligence aligned to produce undeniable clarity. I stood firm, knowing the truth now rested entirely in my hands, unshakable and visible to all. Yet the night's events left threads unresolved. While immediate deception had been exposed, underlying tensions lingered, subtle and persistent. I could feel the residual grudges, the lessons unlearned, the cautious glances that promised lingering consequences. The calm after the confrontation was deceptive, and I sensed that trust, once fractured, would take years to mend, if ever. As I looked out over the marina, the water catching the faint glimmers of light from the deck, I realized that while the immediate battle was won, the war for recognition, respect, and genuine connection within this family had only just begun. The night was far from over. The night air was calm, the marina lights reflecting off the water like a quiet promise. I lingered on the deck, surveying the aftermath of the confrontation, noting every subtle shift, who seemed relieved, who avoided eye contact, who remained stoic. My father's expression had softened in ways I hadn't anticipated, a brief admission of fault in the curve of his jaw and the hesitation in his words. The sister who had tried to undermine me earlier now kept her distance, unsure how to engage. Even amidst residual tension, a sense of cautious optimism settled within me. The unexpected gesture from my father, a silent nod of acknowledgement, was the final twist I hadn't anticipated. Relief washed over me, tempered with awareness that this was only the beginning of restoring balance. Family members processed the revelations differently. Some were embarrassed, retreating into corners of the estate to regroup. A few approached with tentative smiles, acknowledging my patience and composure. Others lingered in silence, hesitant to reconcile or even admit their part. I took the time to reflect on myself, the dignity reclaimed, the power I had quietly exerted, and the lessons learned about trust, patience, and strategic action. I considered the repeated patterns, the manipulations I had endured, and how I had now turned them into stepping stones for authority and respect. In this stillness, I realized that the victories weren't just about exposing wrongdoing, they were about understanding my own worth and reinforcing boundaries that would protect me going forward. The following days I focused on rebuilding my life beyond the shadows of betrayal. Professional projects advanced with renewed energy, hobbies that had been neglected found their way back into my routine. I selectively repaired relationships, choosing carefully who could be trusted and who remained at arm's length. Revisiting the echoes of past slights, I documented them, acknowledged the lessons, and allowed myself the subtle satisfaction of recognition that had long been denied. I no longer sought validation from those who would never provide it willingly. My decisions were guided by reason and reflection, a quiet empowerment that replaced the frustration and resentment of years past. Each step reaffirmed my intelligence, my patience, and the strength that had carried me through. In this moment of clarity, I considered the broader lessons, autonomy, resilience, and the importance of maintaining strategic foresight when facing betrayal. I set personal goals with renewed focus, understanding that life would always present challenges but that I could navigate them with measured confidence. Closure settled in, tempered by realism. Some wounds would leave lingering marks, and some family tensions would never fully dissolve. Yet I felt prepared, grounded in my own authority and equipped to move forward without letting past constraints dictate my future. The calm after the storm was a testament to endurance and mindful action, a platform from which to launch into new horizons. And as the night deepened, a subtle breeze brushing against the deck reminded me that life would continue with its unpredictable tides. Lessons had been learned, boundaries reinforced, and yet the path ahead remained filled with opportunities and tests. I gazed toward the distant lights of the family home, acknowledging the echoes of past conflicts, but also the promise of future growth. Though the storm had passed, I knew the lessons would guide me through every tide yet to come.